Good evening, and welcome to Sleep Sanctuary, where calmness and imagination meet to guide you into a restful sleep. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let the day slip gently into the background. Tonight, I invite you to join me on a journey, a quiet exploration of time, moments, and the unseen connections that shape our lives. Let the world outside fade, and instead settle into the present moment where a story waits to unfold. Tonight, I'll tell you about an encounter that changed the way I see the world and my place within it. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind where the hum of life feels steady and unremarkable. But that night, I met someone extraordinary, a traveler, though not in the way you might imagine. This traveler didn't move through time as we think of it. They didn't leap between centuries or rewrite history. Instead, they walked through time by noticing, by observing, by understanding the threads that connect us all. The stories they shared were not grand or loud. They were quiet, like whispers carried on the wind, yet they carried a weight that lingered long after they were told. One of those stories, in particular, was about me, and perhaps, in some way, about you too. Before we dive deeper into the story, let's take a moment to pause, to breathe, and to let the day melt away. Wherever you are right now, allow yourself to sink into comfort. If you're lying down, feel the weight of your body being supported. If you're sitting, let your shoulders relax and drop. Close your eyes or soften your gaze and take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it for a moment, and then slowly let it out through your mouth. With each breath, feel the tension in your body begin to ease. Breathe in deeply again, filling your lungs with calm, and exhale, releasing any worries that might still linger. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a quiet forest at dusk. The air is cool and crisp, and a gentle breeze whispers through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth. As you step forward, the soft crunch of leaves beneath your feet grounds you, connecting you to this serene moment. Above you, the sky is painted in shades of amber and violet, the first stars beginning to peek through. Each breath you take feels slower, deeper, as if the forest itself is inviting you to relax. Now, imagine a warm light glowing softly in the distance, a small beacon of peace. Let its warmth soothe you as you walk toward it, feeling lighter with each step. The light doesn't demand anything of you, it's simply there, a quiet reassurance that you're exactly where you need to be. Let this stillness wrap around you like a soft blanket on a chilly evening. Let your thoughts drift untethered as you settle into this calm. When you're ready, the story will be here, waiting to unfold. It was a quiet evening when I met the traveler. I had stopped at a small cafe tucked away on a winding street, the kind of place that feels timeless, as if it exists outside the rush of the world. The air was filled with the soft hum of conversation, the clinking of cups, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed tea. I had come seeking a moment of stillness, but I found something far greater. They were sitting at a corner table, alone, their posture relaxed yet purposeful. There was nothing immediately striking about them, yet they had a presence that felt magnetic. Their eyes, calm and steady, seemed to carry the weight of countless stories, as though they had seen more than one lifetime could ever hold. I was about to return to my thoughts when they spoke. Their voice was soft but clear, cutting through the ambient noise like a thread of gold. "Isn't it strange," they said, "how much of life we overlook?" I glanced around, wondering if they were speaking to me. They met my gaze and smiled. "Yes, you," they said, as if they had read my thoughts. "You seem like someone who notices the world, but perhaps not as much as you think." Intrigued, I set down my cup and leaned in slightly. "And you are?" I asked, unsure whether I was about to engage in a strange conversation or simply humor an eccentric stranger. "I'm a traveler," they replied, their tone matter-of-fact. "But not in the way you might imagine. I don't move through time by leaping forward or backward. I walk through it by observing, by seeing what others overlook." Their words were puzzling, yet I couldn't dismiss them. Something about their calm certainty made me stay. "What does that mean?" I asked, curiosity pulling me in. They leaned back, their fingers lightly tracing the rim of their cup. "Time isn't a straight line," they explained. "It's a collection of moments, small, fleeting, and often unnoticed. Most people rush through life, chasing the big things, while the quiet moments slip away. But I've learned to see those moments, to step into them fully, and in doing so, I've walked through more time than you might imagine." Their words hung in the air, strange and profound. I wanted to dismiss them as whimsical nonsense, but something about their presence kept me rooted. "And what do you see in these moments?" I asked. "Stories," they said simply. "Moments of courage, kindness, regret, and love. The threads that weave the fabric of time. I've seen great historical events and the smallest acts of humanity, both equally powerful in their own way." I was silent for a moment, letting their words sink in. I couldn't explain why, but I felt compelled to listen. This traveler, whoever they were, had something to share, something that would change the way I saw the world, and perhaps myself. That was the beginning of the journey. The traveler sat across from me, their gaze distant, as though they were looking at something I couldn't see. History, they began, is often thought of as a series of grand events, battles, revolutions, discoveries. But I've learned that history is rarely made in those dramatic moments alone. It's the quiet decisions, the unnoticed choices, that shape the world far more profoundly than we realize. I leaned forward, caught in their words. "What do you mean?" I asked. They smiled faintly. "Let me show you," they said, their voice lowering as though sharing a secret. Imagine a battlefield centuries ago. On one side stands an army ready to fight for their freedom, on the other, a king desperate to hold his power. The battle never came. Why? Because one soldier, a mere boy, found the courage to step forward and offer a truce. His words reached the general, who listened. That one small act of bravery, unnoticed by the world, saved hundreds of lives that day. Their words painted a vivid picture in my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder if such a small moment could truly change the course of history. "Do you know if the boy was remembered?" I asked. The traveler shook their head. "No," they said softly. "He was forgotten. But the lives he saved were not. Each person who lived that day went on to touch others in ways that rippled far beyond that moment. That's the nature of time, it carries the echoes of the unseen." They paused, letting their words settle before continuing. "Here's another," they said. "A woman in a crowded city, hundreds of years ago, saw a young artist sketching in the dirt. His family was too poor to buy paper, but his talent was undeniable. She didn't know him, but she bought him a notebook and left it on his doorstep. That boy went on to create works that inspired generations, but she never knew what her kindness had done. I felt a strange mixture of awe and sadness. But these people, you see them, but the rest of us don't. Isn't it unfair that they're forgotten? The traveler's eyes softened. No, they said. Not every story needs to be told for its impact to matter. Their moments live on in the lives they touched, and that is enough. What matters is not recognition, but the act itself, the courage, the kindness, the choice to do something good when no one is watching. For a moment, we sat in silence. I thought about all the moments in history I'd been taught, the names and dates etched into books. How many untold stories were hidden in the shadows of those events? How many unnamed people had quietly shaped the world without ever being noticed? The traveler spoke again, their voice soft but resolute. History isn't written by the victors. It's written by the unnoticed, the ones who make choices that ripple through time, even when they think no one will see. I realized then that history wasn't just about what had happened, it was about the moments we choose to create, even now. The traveler's expression grew softer, a trace of melancholy flickering in their eyes. If you asked most people what changes the world, they said, they'd point to grand gestures. Bold speeches, heroic acts, or monumental sacrifices. But the truth, the world is changed by the smallest, most fleeting acts of kindness. The kind you'll never find written in history books. They paused, and for a moment, the air between us felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. Let me take you to a crowded marketplace, they began. Centuries ago, in a bustling city, a boy sat shivering on the edge of the street. He'd been abandoned there days before, too weak to beg, too invisible to be noticed. Most people walked by without a glance, until one elderly woman stopped. She didn't have much herself, just a piece of bread and an old scarf, but she knelt down and gave them to him. That boy grew stronger, and years later, he became a healer in his village. Thousands of lives were touched by his skill and compassion. But here's the thing, he never knew her name, and she never knew what became of him. Her kindness lived on without her ever seeing its full impact. I sat back, absorbing the story, as the traveler continued. There was a man, they said, traveling home after a long and disappointing journey. He felt like a failure, as if the world had no place for him. As he sat on a quiet bench, lost in his despair, a stranger passing by simply smiled at him, one of those genuine, kind smiles that feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. That one moment convinced him to hold on a little longer, to keep trying. He went on to build a school that educated thousands of children, all because of one stranger's smile. Their words struck something deep within me. How many times had I been on the receiving end of small acts of kindness, barely acknowledging them before moving on with my day? How many had I given without realizing the ripple they might cause? The traveler's voice softened further. Kindness, they said, is like planting seeds in a garden you may never see bloom. You don't always know the impact of your actions, but that doesn't mean they're insignificant. A kind word, a helping hand, even a moment of patience, these things can alter the course of someone's life in ways you'll never know. I found myself reflecting on my own life, searching for moments when I might have unknowingly been part of someone's story. How many strangers had I crossed paths with, their lives brushing against mine for only a moment? The traveler leaned forward slightly, their gaze steady. The beauty of kindness is that it doesn't need recognition. Its power lies in its quiet simplicity, its ability to ripple through time unseen. These are the moments that hold the world together. I nodded, feeling both humbled and inspired. Their stories reminded me that even the smallest gesture could echo far beyond what I could imagine. The traveler's gaze shifted, becoming sharper, more deliberate. Their tone, which had been soft and reflective, now carried a quiet urgency. "There's something I must tell you," they said. "Something people often forget in the rush of living." I leaned forward, drawn in by the weight of their words. "The world," they continued, "is louder now than it has ever been. People rush from moment to moment, distracted, always looking ahead to the next task, the next achievement. In doing so, they miss the beauty of what's right in front of them. They miss the small moments that make life extraordinary." Their voice softened again, but the intensity in their eyes remained. "Do you know what happens when you stop noticing?" they asked. "You lose your place in time. Not because time moves too quickly, but because you stop truly being in it. Life becomes a blur, a series of disconnected days, instead of the rich, intricate tapestry it was meant to be." I thought about what they said, the truth of it settling uncomfortably in my chest. How often had I rushed through my own days, distracted by deadlines, screens, and worries, without noticing the quiet beauty surrounding me. Moments, the traveler said, breaking my thoughts, are all we have. They're fleeting, fragile, and irreplaceable. And yet, they hold all the meaning in the world. If you don't pay attention to them, you risk losing the most important thing, not time itself, but the connections and meaning within it. They paused, their expression softening. But it's not too late. That's the gift of being here, now. Time is always offering second chances if you're willing to notice. I looked at them, unsure of how to respond. How do I start? I asked finally. The traveler smiled, the first hint of warmth breaking through their serious demeanor. You already have, they said. By listening, by being curious, by asking the questions you didn't think to ask before. They reached into their coat and pulled out a small object, placing it gently on the table. It was a simple pocket watch, its surface worn with age. But when I looked closer, I saw that the face of the watch didn't have numbers or hands. Instead, it was filled with shifting patterns of light, like tiny fragments of frozen sunlight swirling in a pool of water. This is my gift to you, they said. It's not a tool to measure time, but a reminder to live within it. Keep it with you, and whenever you feel lost or disconnected, hold it. It will guide you back to the present, back to what matters. I picked up the watch, its surface cool against my palm. It felt weighty, not in mass, but in meaning. Time is not something to conquer, the traveler said as they stood. It's something to cherish. Remember that. As they walked away, I sat there, the watch in my hand, and a sense of clarity settled over me. It wasn't too late to live more fully, to notice the small, extraordinary moments I'd been missing. I sat with the traveler's gift in my hand, the watch glinting softly in the dim light. Their words lingered, weaving through my thoughts like a melody I couldn't shake. For a while, I simply sat in silence, reflecting on everything they had shared. Then the traveler returned, as quietly as they had left, sitting down across from me once more. There's one last story I want to share with you, they said, their voice calm but purposeful. It's about you. My chest tightened. Me? I asked, surprised. The traveler nodded. Do you remember they began a day not too long ago when you stopped to help someone on the side of the road? A woman with a broken down car? I thought back and the memory surfaced. It had been a cold, rainy afternoon. I was running late, but I noticed her standing there, struggling to flag someone down. Something in me, instinct, maybe, had urged me to pull over. I had offered her my phone to call for help and stayed with her until a tow truck arrived. It wasn't much, I thought, just a small act of decency. Yes, I said slowly. I remember. The traveler smiled faintly, as though they'd been waiting for this. What you don't know is the ripple that moment created. That woman was having one of the hardest days of her life. She had just lost her job and felt utterly defeated. When you stopped to help, you reminded her that kindness still existed in the world, that she wasn't invisible. I blinked, taken aback. But it was nothing, I said, shaking my head. Anyone would have done the same. Perhaps, the traveler replied, their gaze steady, but the truth is, most people didn't. Many drove by without a second glance. You chose to stop. And because of that, she went home that day with a renewed sense of hope. That hope gave her the courage to keep going, to apply for another job, a job she got. Today, she's thriving, and she's gone on to help others in ways you can't even imagine. I stared at them, my thoughts racing. The idea that such a small act, something I had barely thought about since, could have had such a profound impact felt overwhelming. The traveler continued, their tone gentle. You see, it's not just the monumental acts that matter. Often, it's the quiet choices we make without thinking, the smiles, the words, the moments we stop to care. These are the threads that weave the fabric of time, connecting us in ways we may never fully see. Their words left me speechless. I thought about all the other small moments in my life, the times I had acted on instinct or kindness without knowing why. How many of those moments had created ripples I would never witness? You've touched more lives than you realize, the traveler said, their voice soft but certain. And you will touch many more. Remember, the smallest acts often carry the greatest weight. In that moment, I understood the truth in their words. Time wasn't just something we moved through, it was something we shaped, moment by moment, with every choice we made. The traveller was gone now, leaving me alone with the pocket watch and a whirlwind of thoughts. I sat in the stillness, their words echoing in my mind, carrying a weight I hadn't fully realized before. Outside the cafe window, the evening had settled into night, the world beyond cloaked in quiet shadows. But inside me, something had shifted. I looked down at the watch in my hand. Its surface shimmered faintly, catching the light as though it held a living memory within. The traveller's stories replayed in my thoughts, the pivotal moments in history, the forgotten acts of kindness, and the ripple effects of choices that seemed so small at the time. And then, of course, their final story, mine. Before that moment, I'd never considered how my actions, even the ones I dismissed as inconsequential, could shape the lives of others. I'd always assumed that impact required effort, intention, or a grand gesture. But the traveller had shown me otherwise. It wasn't about the size of the action, it was about the presence, the attention, and the willingness to act in the moment, even when no one was watching. I thought about the countless faces I'd passed in my life, strangers on sidewalks, co-workers I'd barely spoken to, friends I hadn't reached out to in years. How many of them carried stories I would never know? How many lives had I brushed against without realizing the significance of that fleeting connection? The truth was humbling. The traveller's gift wasn't just the watch, it was the perspective they had left me with. A reminder that time isn't something to master or manipulate. It's a series of fleeting, precious moments that we inhabit, shape, and leave behind for others to carry forward. I closed my eyes, breathing in deeply. I thought of all the small kindnesses I'd received in my own life, a teacher's encouraging words, a stranger holding a door for me on a hard day, a friend's quiet patience when I was too stubborn to ask for help. Each one had carried me forward, even if the giver never knew it. The traveller's voice lingered in my memory. The smallest acts often carry the greatest weight. As I left the cafe, stepping into the cool night air, I made a silent promise to myself. I would be more present, more mindful. I would stop chasing time and start noticing it. I would look for the quiet beauty in the unnoticed moments, the ones that slip by too quickly if we're not paying attention. And I would act on instinct, on kindness, on the simple desire to leave the world a little brighter than I found it. Because, as the traveller had taught me, it wasn't about recognition or reward, It was about the ripples we create, the connections we weave, and the lives we touch, often without realizing it. As I walked home, the watch in my pocket felt warm, as if it carried the glow of everything I'd learned. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of time not as a burden, but as a gift.